I'm joined now live by Chris Doyle, who is the Director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. And he joins me now live from London. Chris, thank you for joining me on the Al Jazeera News Hour. It's certainly not an insignificant amount of money, but given the sheer scale of devastation, perhaps this simply isn't enough.
Look, chucking millions of aid into Gaza isn't going to do the trick. This is the same old British government that treats Gaza as simply a humanitarian situation where, unfortunately, some blocks to aid getting in have occurred and that it calls on Israel somehow to better facilitate this. I mean, this is not a humanitarian crisis. It is a situation of acute atrocities, of war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and arguably genocide against a captive civilian population under Israeli military occupation. So the UK is trying to help feed the victims whilst at the same time arming the perpetrators, Israel, that are bombing them. We feed them before they get bombed. So it is nonsensical to have a policy that focuses solely on the provision of aid. And remember, there's huge amounts of aid sitting outside the Gaza Strip waiting to get in, but it can't. It's a political failure.
And
so
Chris,
the victims...
You mentioned the aid that hasn't been able to get into Gaza because of Israel. And I'll read to you a quote from Annalise Dodds, who is the Development Minister, that Israel must immediately act to ensure unimpeded aid access to Gaza. It does seem to reflect the sentiment that you were just talking about, that there's this determination to give aid without calling for accountability.
Precisely, and this was a message that I actually gave to the minister very directly in a recent meeting, saying that you have to hold Israel to account. In fact, the issue of access to aid is nowhere near as important as actually getting to stopping the bombing, stopping the atrocities, stopping this policy of starvation as a weapon of war. What's the point of supplying aid into Gaza if you do not condemn and do something about Israel bombing, for example, bakeries, or not allowing fuel in that could actually allow people to bake bread and hopefully live lives in a situation where, of course, the winter rains are coming in and so forth. So what Palestinians in Gaza need is states like Britain to stick up for the rules-based international order, for international law, that this new government in Britain, a Labour government, insists that it support that international law and that Israel should abide by them. But it's simply not holding the Israeli government to account. And we have seen this throughout the entirety, not just of the last 14 months, but frankly, for a very long time, for decades.
And Chris, of course, this comes at a time when we just heard from the UN Food and Agriculture Agency that food availability in Gaza is at an all-time low across the entire Strip. I'm curious to know, you mentioned that you met with the minister. What was the response to what you had to say?
Well, it was a private meeting, but ministers are on the record in Parliament and in other fora where they have made very clear that they are looking to try to get aid in. They do not accept criticizing Israel in terms of its violations of international law. So take the International Court of Justice. It issued provisional measures to prevent genocide. That was back in January, with additional provisional measures ordered since then. The British government has not said that Israel has to abide by those provisional measures. It has not responded as yet to Israel, to the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion, seminal advisory opinion, saying that the occupation, both of Gaza and the West Bank, is unlawful. It has said nothing on that. And it's trying to avoid having to confirm that both domestically and internationally, it is obliged to arrest the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu if he sets foot on British soil, following the International Criminal Court's decision to issue arrest warrants. So we are seeing a situation in which Britain is allowing Israel to commit these atrocities cost-free, and in that it is only just lagging behind the US and Germany, which have been the biggest supporters of Israel and everything it's doing. We come in probably at third. And it makes us complicit. It makes us complicit in what's going on. We are still providing weapons to a state that is committing war crimes. That is unconscionable. So whatever aid we are giving will not remove that responsibility that the British government, both this one and the previous government, have for those crimes in Gaza.
Chris, thank you so much for your analysis. That's Chris Doyle, who is the Director for the Council of Arab-British Understanding.